well, we'll go ahead and get started. It looks like we've got a pretty good group here, so I'm super excited to have you guys all joining me today. Healthy posture and in-hand work and that kind of thing is one of my favorite things to talk about and work on with my students and my horses. So I'm really excited to have you guys here and to be able to share this with you and help you guys to help your horses to feel better and to be more comfortable in their work. So today we are going to start off by talking about what healthy posture is, what that looks like, what that means, and kind of go through some basic, very basic anatomy. I will say that this is not going to be an in-depth anatomy class. So we're just going to kind of touch on some different areas of the body and talk about those a little bit today. But you're not going to have to memorize any crazy names of muscles and that kind of thing. If you are looking to go farther in depth into the anatomy, because it is really interesting and you can really go down the rabbit hole with that and get really, really into the anatomy and everything. So if you are interested in learning more about that, I would highly recommend a course taught by Jillian Kreinbring. Her course, she's got an online course. She does also teach it in person too. If you're able to see it in person, it's fantastic. But it is online as well, and it's functional anatomy. And she goes a lot more in depth into the anatomy than what I'm going to be covering in this class. So that's a great option if you are interested in learning more about that. And I will post a link for her course in the Facebook group, so you guys can check that out if you're interested. And then I'm excited too, because I know we've got a couple different body workers in this class. I don't know if any of them are here tonight, but I would love to have them chime in with any additional information or thoughts that they have too from their perspective as we're talking about posture and movement and that kind of thing. So that's super exciting as well. Okay, so as we're talking about posture and healthy movement, there's a couple of things that we want to kind of keep in mind as we're talking about things tonight, and then as you're going through the different exercises throughout this course. So when we talk about posture, we're not talking about putting the horse in a frame or that kind of thing. It's not going to be a fixed position. We're not going to force the horse into any kind of fixed position or frame or that kind of thing. A healthy posture and healthy movement is all about balance and just teaching the horse how to use their bodies in a way that's going to be easier for them to move and more comfortable for them. So it's just about balance, healthy movement, but it's not about a certain look or a certain frame or that kind of thing, okay? And this is something that's important for horses, regardless of what you're going to be doing with them. So it's not just a dressage thing. This is beneficial for horses of any discipline. And actually, a lot of the people that I work with are just pleasure riders or maybe trail riders. They have no interest in competing. They might not even be dressage riders, but they just want their horses to feel better and to move well and to be comfortable in the work that they're doing. This work is going to help them, regardless of what it is that you're doing with your horse. I've worked with English riders, Western riders, all kinds of different riders who have all benefited from teaching their horses to move in a healthy way. Okay, so as I mentioned, the healthy posture can't be forced. So if we try and force our horses into a frame, that's just going to cause tension and bracing and resistance from the horse. And we're going to talk a little bit more later on about how tension affects the horse and how that affects their posture and their movement and that kind of thing. But basically, tension is going to make things harder for the horse and going to make him more uncomfortable. So as we're going through all of these different exercises, you need to think about kind of like you're here to guide the horse and to help him find the posture, but you can't force him into it. And you can't just artificially create it. So we're going to set the horse up to be we're going to set him up so that he can find that posture for himself, and we're going to kind of guide him and show him how to find it, but we can't force the horse into it. Okay. And then another thing that we want to keep in mind as we're going through and talking about posture and doing the different exercises is that posture is dynamic. And that means that it's always changing. There's not going to be one fixed set posture that your horse is going to have all the time. Even moment to moment, the posture might be changing depending on what your horse is doing. So that's where, again, kind of that idea of putting your horse into a frame, we don't really want to be thinking about that. A lot of times people will try and put their horse into a fixed position and try and keep them in that fixed position because they're looking for a certain look or that kind of thing. But that is, again, going to cause tension and bracing and things that we want to avoid. So we need the horse to be able to move freely and to change and adjust his posture as he needs to. Okay, posture is dynamic. The horse is always moving, always changing. And there's no one posture that is going to be the ideal posture for every horse and for all the time. There's a lot of different things that are going to affect a horse's posture. Things such as the horse's age, the horse's breed and conformation, the horse's training level and fitness level, and then even what you're asking the horse to do at that particular time. So, of course, an extended trot is going to have a very different posture than a collected canter. And lateral work might have a different posture. And, you know, even for a younger horse or a more basic level horse, you know, you might do a collected walk. Or if you're out on the trail, you might need a different walk depending on the kind of terrain that you're going over, or different things like that. So there's a lot of different postures and different variations of postures. And it's actually really good and really beneficial for your horse to practice changing between postures and not to always be in one fixed position. Okay. Changing between different postures is going to really keep them soft and supple and athletic. Okay. All right. So those are kind of the things to keep in mind as we are talking about posture. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about what healthy posture is, and also a little bit about a horse's more natural posture. And I think I saw a question come up in the chat that says, don't horses naturally have healthy posture and movement? And that's a great question because that's exactly where we're going to go next. So horses have the posture that they need for their natural, what they naturally do. Okay, so if you think about what a horse naturally does, they spend most of their time standing around grazing with their heads down or just hanging out. And then they might have to run for short spurts if they need to get away from danger or that kind of thing. So they have a certain posture that enables them to do that. Okay, but I'm guessing that you've never seen a horse naturally carrying a rider around on their back or naturally going around in circles in an arena or that kind of thing. So we've kind of taken our horses out of their natural environment, and we're asking them to do things that are different than what they would normally naturally do. So this is going to, for them to be able to do this in a way that's going to be comfortable for them and healthy for them, we need to adjust their posture a little bit. And I'm gonna play a video for you here. This is a video that I pre-recorded, and it's a demonstration that's gonna show you the difference between a horse's natural posture and then the posture that we want them to take while we're riding them. And this is a generalization. Of course, each horse is going to be a little bit different, but this will give you kind of a good overview of horse's natural posture versus the posture that we're looking for when we're riding them and why that's so important. Okay, so let's see if I can share my screen here. Okay. All right, can you guys see the screen that says healthy posture for the working horse? Okay, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to play this video.
In this video, we're going to talk about a horse's natural posture, and we're going to talk about why that's not the best and most effective posture for them to be in when we're riding them or working with them. So one thing to keep in mind is that a horse naturally carries about 60% of their weight on their front end. And if you think about it, that really makes sense, because what do horses spend most of their time doing? They've got their heads on the ground and they're eating, right? So it makes sense that they have most of their weight on their front end. That's the way that they're designed. So that's just fine and great for them when they're out in a field, not carrying a rider, not being asked to do any work and that kind of thing. Totally fine. But it's not the best posture for them to be in when they are carrying a rider and when we are asking them to do different kinds of work than they wouldn't normally do in their normal daily lives out in a field. So we're gonna do a little demonstration. I've got Kelly here joining me today, and we're just gonna demonstrate some different postures that your horse can take. And you're gonna see the difference, and Kelly, you're gonna feel the difference in between these different postures. And if you're watching this at home, I'd actually encourage you to try this out yourself because you can really feel the difference in between the different postures, and it's going to maybe give you a little bit more understanding for what your horse is going through and what they have to learn and how they need to change their bodies and use their bodies in different ways. So you're going to be my horse, Kelly. So I'm going to have you get down on your hands and knees to be my horse. And actually, if you would face it this way. Okay, so like we just talked about, horses carry most of their weight on their front end. So if you would kind of lean onto your front, a little bit more like that, you're going to be carrying most of your weight on, I think about 60% of your weight on your front end and about 40% on the back end. Okay. Now, horses also have natural asymmetries, just like people do. So like people are right-handed or left-handed. Horses tend to lean more on one side or the other. With a lot of horses, they're heavier on their right side. Not always, but that's kind of what I see more commonly. So if you want to put a little bit more weight on your right side so that you're a little bit crooked, and then if you're gonna feel like you're gonna kind of go down to eat, so you might drop down into your sternum a little bit. You don't have to go all the way down, and then just kind of let your back hang down naturally. You're not really gonna be holding yourself up into any certain posture. Okay, so this is kind of a typical normal posture for a horse out in a field. So if I come over to you, I can put weight on your back, and I'm going to put some weight here. What did you just do? Yeah, you just buckled away from me and dropped your back down away from me, right? And did you feel like you could support that weight very well? No, not at all. So if I have that weight here again, and that time you even knew what was going to happen, and you still did it. So now think about okay, that's good. How did that feel? Not easy. Not easy at all, right? Very difficult, very uncomfortable. You really can't use your body very well, right? Okay. So now what I'm going to ask you to do is kind of push yourself up a little bit more. Yeah, there you go. Good. And then you're going to think about lifting your chest and engaging your core. So you, lift your back up. Exactly. And you guys could probably see the change in her back on the video. And then now, because we've lifted your back up and we've lifted your front end up a little bit more, you can kind of step your hind legs underneath you a little bit more. Yeah. And then sink a little bit more of your weight onto your hind legs. Yeah, good. Okay. So now if I come over here and I put weight on you, how does that feel? Feels okay. Does it feel like you could support that? Yeah. And her back feels very strong to me right now versus before when her back was hollow and I put weight on her back. It did not feel very stable. It did not feel very strong. I was easily able to move her. Whereas now this is a very strong, stable platform. And I'm actually putting more weight on you now than I was before. And you're able to support that, right? Okay. So now with that weight there, see if you can take a few steps forward. Good. All right. How did that feel? Easy, right? Awesome. Good. You can go ahead and stand back up. Thank you for being the horse. Cool. So what differences did you feel?
I definitely felt that I was able to support your weight on the second time around. I did not feel stable or balanced the first time. It felt like I was going to buckle and fall over at some point.
Yeah, definitely. So when the back is hollow and the weight is on the forehand, it's going to be really difficult for your horse to support your weight as a rider. And it's also going to be very difficult for them to move their bodies and perform any kind of athletic activity. Okay, because again, this is the posture that they take when they're standing around eating and grazing. This is what they do most of the day, but it's not the best posture for activity. When you are able to lift yourself up, push yourself up a little bit more, engage your core, lift your back, bring your hind end underneath you a little bit more, and shift your weight backwards, then it was a lot easier to move, right? And a lot easier to support the weight. Your back was very strong and solid. So this is a posture that horses will take naturally. If you think about a horse that's playing or running away from danger or fighting with another horse or doing some kind of athletic activity like that, they will take on this posture naturally. But usually they only do it for short periods of time, and then they go back to that resting posture, which was the first posture. Okay. So our goal when we want to put weight on their backs and we want them to do athletic work, we need to teach them how to come into this more athletic posture, this healthier posture. We need to teach them how to come into that when we ask them to. So we have to kind of put a cue to it and teach them how to come into that posture. And then we also have to teach them how to maintain that posture for a longer length of time, okay? Because again, normally it's something they might do for, maybe even only a few seconds, and then they go back to their other posture, or maybe it's a few minutes at a time or whatever, but it's not gonna be a very prolonged amount of time, and then they go back to their other posture. So we need to teach them how to maintain this more active, engaged posture for a longer amount of time. And this is something that's going to take time and practice for the horse to develop. So you can think about if I took a person who was used to just kind of sitting on the couch in a slouch posture, not doing any athletic work, and I took them to the gym and wanted to try and get them in shape, It's not all going to happen right away in one day, right? You have to develop their strength, their coordination, their stamina, and all of those things. So it's a process that we have to go through with our horses, but it is very important for them to learn. When they're in this athletic posture, as we've already said, it's going to be a lot easier for them to carry the rider. It's going to be a lot easier for them to perform their jobs, whatever that is we're going to ask them to do. Whether it's a dressage test or jumping or just going on a trail ride or Western events or whatever you're going to do with your horse, having them in a healthy posture is going to make that easier for them. And then it's also going to increase their longevity. So when they're in that healthier posture, it's going to put a lot less strain on their bodies, a lot less strain on their muscles, their joints. And so because of that, they're going to stay comfortable, they're going to stay healthier, and they're going to be able to work for longer and be comfortable for much longer. So it's really important that we teach this to our horses for our horses' health and comfort and for their safety.
Cool. All right. So, whoops. Oh, there we go. All right. So a lot of you probably saw this post and actually found this class through this image that I shared. And it just shows you some different postures that the horse can take with their back. So on the bottom, we have a horse with a hollow back. And as you saw in the video, when I put weight onto Kelly's back and she wasn't ready for it and she wasn't in a posture that was able to support that weight, when I put the weight on her back, she hollowed her back away from the weight, right? And your horses will do this too. Okay, so if I take a horse that's never had a rider on its back and hasn't been taught how to come into a more engaged posture, when I put that weight on their back, they're going to hollow their back away from that weight. Okay. And as you can see in this image, that is going to put a lot of pressure on the back. You can see the spinous processes on top of the spine here and how close they are together. And that can cause quite a bit of discomfort to your horse, and can eventually even lead to long-term pain. Try and make sure that we are not putting weight onto a horse that has a hollow back. And again, if they haven't been taught otherwise, they will naturally hollow their back when they feel weight against it. So this middle picture is a horse that has started to learn how to lift their back up. And we're going to talk more about how they do that as we go on. But this horse has started to lift his back up and come into a more neutral position. Okay, so a horse, again, like we talked about, posture is going to be dynamic, and there's a lot of different postures the horse is going to take, and especially as they go through their training program. So fitness takes time to develop. Right, so we're not going to be able to take a horse with a lifted back right away. Okay, we're going to have to go through a progression to get there, and that's going to take time. But you can see the difference in the neutral back and how the spinous processes on the top are spaced out much farther apart, and that's going to alleviate any pressure on the back there and make the horse a lot more comfortable. And then eventually with continued training, the horse can learn to lift their back up even more. And again, you can see even more spacing in the spinous processes there. So that's going to be in an even more comfortable position for the horse. And there's actually a really cool video. I don't have it here today, but I will post it in the Facebook group, and it shows actual x-rays of a horse's back when they're in just a neutral position, It's with a horse that doesn't have any weight on their back. So just the horse standing neutrally, naturally, and then the horse engaging and lifting his back. And it shows the differences in the x-rays. So that's pretty cool. All right. So we're going to talk about, as we talk about posture, there's a few areas that we're going to focus on. And actually, before we get into that, we're going to talk a little bit more about tension, because tension is something that is going to play a big role in your horse's posture and is going to affect their posture quite a bit. So it's something that we definitely want to think about and talk about a little bit. So you've probably heard at some point in time that horses should be ridden back to front, or that the horse's power comes from behind and that kind of thing. And well, that is true. And the power does come from the back, and you do want to be riding the horse back to front, meaning that the energy is coming from the back and flowing through to the front. There are some things that can affect whether or not you're going to be able to, or the horse is going to be able to use that power, and the energy is going to be able to flow the way that it needs to. Okay, so if the horse has tension anywhere in his body, that is going to affect that flow of energy and his ability to use that power from his hind end. So I like to think about it, the image I like to use is, if you think about a hose, and you've got your hose and the water flows from the back end of the hose out to the front of the hose and then comes out the front, right? So that's kind of a similar idea as the energy of the horse flowing from the back to the front. But now think about if I put a kink in that hose. Okay, if there's a kink in that hose, the water is not going to be able to flow through the way that it needs to. And depending on how big the kink is, it might, you might just get a little trickle of water, or you might not even get any water at all coming out of the front because of that kink. So tension in the horse's body is kind of like having a kink in your hose, and it's going to interfere with the flow of energy and the ability for the horse to use their power and use their body in the way that they need to. So before I start trying to do any kind of athletic exercises or strength building exercises, I want to go through and make sure that I eliminate any of those tension areas, those kinks in my horse, so that he can work in the way that he needs to. So we're going to talk about a few different areas that I commonly see tension in horses. In this class, we're going to be targeting some of those exercises. Okay, so the first area that I commonly see tension is the horse's poll. You've probably heard of that area on the horse before, but a lot of people don't really know what that is. So the poll, a lot of people think it's at the top of the horse's head, and it is, but the poll is actually referring to a specific joint. So what we're talking about when we talk about the horse's poll is we're talking about the joint between the horse's skull and the horse's first cervical vertebrae. Okay, so it's where the skull attaches to the spine, the cervical vertebrae of the spine. Okay, it's that joint there. This joint is also called the atlanto-occipital joint. And again, you don't have to remember all of the terms, but just for a little extra information for you, it's referred to as the atlanto-occipital joint, and that's because it's the joint between the atlas, which is the first cervical vertebrae, and the occiput of the skull. So the atlanto-occipital joint, or the AO joint. So you're the horse's poll. So that pull right up at the top of the horse's skull there, that is a very vulnerable location for the horse. There are a lot of very sensitive nerves that run through that area. It's the connection to the horse's skull. So it's a very vulnerable area that the horse naturally wants to protect. Okay, so if a horse is feeling any kind of anxiety or anxiousness or anything like that, they're automatically going to be tense in their pull because they want to protect that area. So for a horse to let go and release that pull, it actually takes quite a bit of trust and vulnerability on their part. But when they do release that, it has quite an effect on the rest of the body, the rest of the horse's body. And then another joint that's very closely related is the horse's TMJ, or their temporomandibular joint. And that is the joint where the jaw connects together. Okay, so with the horse, it's actually right up here, right underneath where the ear is. So it's very close to that 8-0 joint, the horse's pull. So a lot of times if the horse is tight in their pull, they're going to be tight in their TMJ as well, and vice versa. So when I'm working on those two areas, a lot of times I will work on them together and get the horse to release in both of those areas. A lot of horses, especially if they've had a bit in their mouth and maybe someone has ridden them who hasn't been very gentle with the bit, they learn how to clench their jaw to protect themselves from any pain that they might have felt before, discomfort from the bit. So they learn how to clench their jaw, and that can create tension all through the rest of the body. So those are the first two areas that I usually focus on. So here we have a little pony that is a pony that we got for our 5-year-old son. And she is one that she basically hadn't had a whole lot of work done with her. So I have been starting her under saddle and getting her going too. But if you look at the first picture, you can see that she's kind of looking a little anxious. She's got her head up in the air, and she just doesn't look very relaxed. She's pretty braced in her neck, and very alert and that kind of thing. With this horse, I did some exercises to release the tension in her pull and release the tension in her jaw. And the second picture is her posture after doing just those exercises in just one session. And it's not a perfect posture, but by any means, but you can see the difference in the horse and how she's relaxed her neck, lengthened her neck. She's more relaxed overall in her body, and she's taken on a much more relaxed posture just by releasing that tension in her pull and in her TMJ. And as we go through the course, we're going to be looking at different exercises to help release this tension in your horse. So today is just kind of about looking at those different areas and seeing what that looks like. Okay, so you can see that the tension in Maya here too. She's got a very upright neck, high-headed. It's probably hard to see in the picture, but she's got a tight clenched jaw, not a lot of mobility in her pull. So if I asked her to bend, she would be resistant to that. Excuse me. Okay, so then the next area that we're going to look at is the horse's shoulder area. So we're going to look at the base of her neck. We're going to look at her sternum and shoulder area and her withers area. So an interesting thing about horses is that horses do not have a collarbone or clavicle like humans do. That's the bone in humans that attaches our shoulders to our sternum and our rib cage. Horses do not have that bone. So a horse's shoulder is attached to the rest of their body only by soft tissue. So you could actually, if you were going to do a dissection, you could take a knife and cut around the horse's scapula and detach the leg from the rest of the horse without ever cutting through bone. So kind of an interesting thing about horses that's different than people. So because horses don't in their shoulders and their sternum is supported by muscle rather than that bony connection. So this means that horses can develop quite a bit of tension in their shoulders. So this is another area that I'm going to look at when I'm looking for tension and tight areas. Ooh, sorry, guys. Another thing that's interesting is because there isn't that bony connection, the horse's rib cage can actually move up and down in between the shoulders. So if you think about the shoulders, the legs, the front legs, it's kind of like two pillars, and then the rib cage is in between them. But the rib cage can actually move up and down a fairly decent amount in between those shoulders. So a horse that's heavy on their forehand is going to drop their rib cage down, and the weight is going to go down into their sternum, down into the base of their neck here. And their withers are going to drop down, and the rib cage is going to drop down. And that's going to put their weight even more on their forehand. So there's a group of muscles in the horse's chest and shoulders and connected to their sternum and their rib cage. And this group of muscles is called the thoracic sling. You may have heard that term before. So this group of muscles is what's responsible for kind of supporting the horse's neck, shoulders, and moving that rib cage up and down in between the legs. So when these muscles are tight or not working correctly, that horse's rib cage is going to drop down. And again, the weight's going to go down into the sternum and into the base of the neck, and the withers are going to drop down, and the weight's going to be on the forehand. When the horse's weight is on his forehand like that and his rib cage is dropped down, it's going to be very difficult for him to bring his hind end underneath him, his hind legs underneath him the way that he needs to be able to shift his weight and use his hind end more effectively. So this is an interesting case study that I've been able to do recently with a horse that's come to me for training. So if you look at this horse, you look at the base of his neck here, you can see it's kind of bulging out a little bit. And then if you look right in front of his withers here, there's this dip right in front of his withers there. And what this tells me is that this horse is not using his thoracic sling correctly, and that his weight is dropped down into his sternum. That's why you're seeing that bulge underneath the neck there. And that's why you're seeing the dip on top, because his weight and everything is dropping down into his sternum. So here we've got when he first came into training with me, and his wonderful owner has been working very hard with him. She decided to stop riding him and go back to the basics and do in-hand work with him. And then recently she has been able to start riding him again. The in-hand work has made a huge difference in his posture. And if you look at the bottom picture, this was taken, I think it's probably about 4 months after she decided to restart him with the in-hand work. And you can see how much that dip is going away just within a few months of work. And of course, that's going to take time to develop as the horse learns to use his body better and those muscles get stronger and he becomes more engaged with his thoracic sling. That dip is going to go away even more. And actually, when the horse is being ridden, both these pictures were taken with the horse in his natural resting posture. When the horse is being ridden and he's being asked to engage his body even more, this dip isn't even visible at all. So you can see the difference that doing the in-hand work can make in the horses, even in his normal resting posture there. So you can see things like that and lack of use of the thoracic sling or incorrect use of the thoracic sling in horses that aren't working very hard. Maybe they've just been sitting out in a field, not really doing anything. And they've just kind of haven't been using that and lost condition that way. But you can also see it in horses that have been forced into a false frame using gadgets and that kind of thing. Because when you force them into a frame, again, like we talked about, it's just going to create that tension and the bracing. And then they do tend to drop down into their sternum and they don't use those thoracic sling muscles correctly. So sometimes you'll see that atrophy of those muscles in horses that have been ridden incorrectly or put into a false frame. Okay. And then you can see that a little bit here in Maya. It's not quite as dramatic with her because she is a pretty athletic horse naturally, but there's a little bit more weight in her sternum. Her withers are dropped down. She's not lifting herself up as much. And there is a little bit of a bulge underneath her neck here as she's in this less ideal posture. Another interesting thing about the thoracic sling and developing horses is because of the way that the withers and the rib cage are able to move between the front legs is when a horse begins using their thoracic sling and developing the muscles of the thoracic sling, they can actually get taller, which sounds kind of crazy, but as that rib cage comes up, it lifts them up to a couple inches taller just by engaging their thoracic sling correctly. So kind of an interesting thing about that. Okay, so she's got her weight on her forehand, and then her back is just kind of hollow. She's not engaging her core, and then her hind legs are kind of just out behind her there, not really in a good position to be able to effectively use her body. And then emotionally, because that is also part of posture, emotionally, she's more nervous and distracted. And when this picture was taken, she was kind of looking around at things that were making noise and very distracted and jumpy and that kind of thing. So oftentimes posture is also a reflection of the horse's emotional state. So that's something that we're going to talk a little bit more about as well. All right. Okay, so now this picture was taken after I did a series of in-hand exercises with her, and all of the exercises you're going to learn how to do yourself. And you can see the difference in her posture. So she's released the tension in her pole, in her AO joint, and in her TMJ. So if I were to ask her to bend, she would be able to do so easily. She's not clenching or bracing her jaw. And I know you can't really see that in the picture, but you'll just have to take my word for it, that I was able to feel those changes in her as I was working with her. And because she's released that tension, she's also released her entire top line. And you can see how from the top of her head here to the tip of her tail, this line, her top line, has actually gotten longer. And you get to see both pictures side by side in a second. So she's released her top line, and her top line has actually gotten longer. Her neck is nice and soft. She's reaching her nose down and out, again, lengthening her top line, which is then going to allow her back to lift up the way that it needs to. If you look at the underneath of her neck here, it's much softer. You're not seeing any kind of bulge underneath there. So then she's going to be able to use her thoracic sling to lift her rib cage up, lift her withers up. And then she'll also be able to engage her abdominals, and that will help to lift her back up. And once the back is up, then the hind legs are going to be able to step underneath and carry more weight and help her to use her body more effectively. And then emotionally, she's much more relaxed, she's focused, she's attentive, she's comfortable. So we're in a much better state emotionally as well. Okay, so here's the two pictures side by side, so you can see the difference. The first picture, again, was taken at the beginning of our session when I first brought her into the arena. And she was just kind of looking around. There were some things going on that she was a little nervous about. And she's in kind of a more tense, nervous posture. And then the second picture shows the difference after doing the series of in-hand exercises. So again, in the first picture, we've got the tension in the pole, in the TMJ, the neck, sternum, and withers are dropped, putting the weight on her forehand. Her back is hollowing, and she's nervous and distracted. And then in the second picture, she's released the tension in her pole, in her TMJ. The top line has released. Now you can really see the difference in the length of her top line. Her nose is reaching down and out. She's able to lift her sternum and withers, able to start to lift her back, and she's relaxed and attentive and ready to go to work. All right. So this is a really cool picture that I found a while ago, and it is not my picture. I wish I knew whose picture it was so that I could credit them. But it is a wonderful image that shows kind of what healthy posture looks like. And again, we want to remember that there's degrees of posture. So a horse that's new to learning healthy posture is going to look very different than a horse, an advanced dressage horse that's been doing it for years and can do very collected work. But in this picture, you can see that the horse is raising the base of the neck, so lifting up. These muscles here are the thoracic sling muscles that we were talking about. Okay, lifting up the sternum, lifting up the rib cage, lifting the withers up. The top line is lengthened. The abdominal muscles are engaged. Got the abdominals here. This blue one is the psoas. Those are engaged. And then that is allowing the hind legs to come under the horse's body the way that they need to. And then the weight is able to shift to the rear. And then now the horse has full access to his power. He's now able to work from back to front like you have probably heard that they should. The energy is going to be able to flow through his body effectively because we've released the tension, we've released all of the kinks, and he's now in a posture where he can do whatever it is that you want to ask him to do. Okay. And again, remember that there's degrees to this. So a horse that's just walking around on the trail is going to look different than an advanced dressage horse, but they're all, for all of them, we want to think about this idea of healthy posture for whatever level and whatever degree that they're at. So they're not all going to look the same, but they should all be doing this type of work to some degree so that they can stay healthy in whatever it is that we're asking them to do. Okay. All right. So there is also an emotional component to this, as we mentioned. So oftentimes posture is a reflection of the horse's emotional state. A horse that's anxious, nervous, or maybe confused or frustrated or that kind of thing is going to have a very different posture than a horse that is relaxed and focused and attentive. So the in-hand exercises that we're going to be doing in this course, I like to think of it as like yoga for horses. So the horses or the exercises are going to be done in a very slow, easy, comfortable way. We're not going to pressure the horse into doing anything. We're just going to guide them into different positions and postures, kind of like you would do different poses if you were doing a yoga routine. And it's done very slowly and in a relaxed, quiet way. So the exercises themselves can help the horse to find more relaxation. Kind of like if you do a yoga routine and then afterwards you feel more relaxed, and you might feel a little bit less stressed or emotionally feel better after doing yoga. So a similar idea can happen with the horses, and that going through these exercises can help them to relax and feel better emotionally as well. So the body and the emotions are very closely connected. So by helping them to release tension in their bodies, we can also oftentimes help them to release any kind of emotional tension or anxiety that they might have. This is again, though, why we want to remember that we're not going to try and force the horse to do any of the exercises or the postures or positions, because if you try and force it, it's just going to create more anxiety and more tension and more bracing. So again, we're just going to think about the idea of guiding the horse and helping him, but we can't force this to happen. You can't force relaxation. So it's something we just want to set it up so that the horse can find it for himself. And then we also want to talk about our energy as we're working with our horses. So this is going to be a very important component as well. And in this image, I've got some different energies that we might be taking on ourselves. And you want to think about your energy, because this is going to have a big impact on your horse. Horses are very tuned into energy. It's how they communicate with each other in the herd. And we could do a whole entire Zoom call on just this. And actually I have before, where we go really in depth into our energy and how it influences our horses and how we can use it to communicate with our horses. But just for now, I'll just say that it does have an impact. You've probably heard that, horses can sense fear and that kind of thing. And they definitely can. And the more aware of our energy we can help our horses then, depending on our horse's unique needs. So in this image, I've got some different energies that you can think about. And this is supposed to be like a gear shifter. If any of you guys remember driving stick shift cars, I know there's not too many of those out there anymore, but some of you have probably driven a stick shift car. So you can think about shifting through the different energies like you would shift through gears in your stick shift car. So we've got neutral energy. That's one that I'll take if I'm just kind of letting the horse process or release tension or that kind of thing. I'll take more of a neutral energy. If I've got a more nervous, anxious type horse, I might think about feelings of safety and comfort. So what you can do if you're not really sure what energy you're taking, think about a time when you felt really safe and really comfortable, or you think about like what makes you feel safe. You know, maybe it's getting a hug from someone, or wrapping yourself up in a blanket, or whatever it is. You can just think about a time when you felt really safe and comfortable, and think about what that feels like in your body and the energy that your body has when you think about that. So safety and comfort is one that I will take if I'm working with a more nervous, anxious type horse. I want to really kind of help them to find that safe feeling within themselves. And horses will oftentimes mirror whatever energy it is that we have. So that's why it's really important for us to be aware of our own energies, because they will oftentimes mirror it and reflect it back to us. Gratitude is one that I will take oftentimes after my horse has done something that I was asking them to do, or done something really well, and I want them to know that they did a good job. And of course, we're going to reward them in other ways as well by releasing pressure. And you may use positive reinforcement to reward your horse. But you can also use this energy of gratitude and thankfulness too. And horses really actually respond really well to this. And it can become kind of a form of positive reinforcement in itself, for you to just really be thankful when your horse does something well. The idea of soft confidence is one that I will often take when I'm working with my horses. And this is kind of the idea where I am confident in what I'm asking them to do. So I want to be clear and confident when I'm asking them to do something. I don't want to be kind of wishy-washy or not really sure what I'm asking, because then the horse then isn't going to feel as confident in me. They're going to feel like I don't really know what I'm doing. So they're going to be less inclined to want to do whatever it is I'm asking them to do. So I want to think about being confident in myself and in what I'm doing. But again, I'm not going to be forceful about anything. So I'm there, I'm confident, and I'm there to just help them and guide them and help them figure out what it is, whatever it is that I'm trying to ask them to do. And if we look down at the bottom, we've got serenity. That's one that I often will take when I'm just kind of hanging out with my horses and enjoying spending time with them and just feeling peaceful and restful and calm and quiet. So that's a good one to do kind of outside of your work, when you're just hanging out with your horse and spending time with them and enjoying their presence and that kind of thing. And that is a really important part of your work, is to make sure that you spend time with your horse where you're not always asking them to do something, where there's time where you're just hanging out with your horse and just enjoying being with your horse. Joy kind of goes along with that idea too. It's a little bit more kind of a happy, maybe a little higher energy than serenity is, but kind of a similar idea. And then fun and interesting is one that I will take on if I have a horse that's really low energy and I want to kind of wake them up a little, kind of get them a little more excited. If they're, some of those super low energy chill horses that need to kind of be a little bit more engaged and need to have a little bit more energy, I'll think about getting really fun and excited and that kind of thing myself, as if whatever we're doing is like the most interesting thing that we could ever possibly be doing in this moment. And I just get really excited myself, and that helps them to kind of get a little more excited and interested in whatever we're doing. So you can kind of think about those and play around with those different energies as you're working with your horse. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong energy to use. It's really what your horse needs and is going to respond best to. So it might change depending on what horse you're working with, or even what you're doing with your horse. But just start to be a little bit more aware of what energy you have when you're working with your horse, and make sure you're not bringing in any of those more negative energies that you might have from, your bad day at work, or that annoying thing that your kid said to you today, or whatever it is. Try and leave those things at the door and really pay attention to the energy that you have and that you're bringing to your horse. All right. Okay, so we've talked about healthy posture and what it is and what it looks like, how we're going to achieve a healthy posture. There's a lot of benefits to in-hand work. First of all, it improves communication between the horse and the human. So you're going to develop your communication with your horse before you even get on his back. So that way, when you do start riding him, you're going to have improved communication, and that's going to make everything easier for you when you do start riding. It's going to build trust and confidence between you and your horse. So the more you can build up your horse's trust and confidence, if you can start on the ground, then again, when you go to ride your horse, he's already going to be feeling more confident, and then things are going to be easier for you. As we talked about, it's going to unlock tension, stiffness, or bracing in the horse's body. And then the horse is going to be able to build strength, increase flexibility, improve balance, develop coordination, all without the extra difficulty of, that should say carrying a rider, not crying a rider. So if we can teach the horse healthy posture without a rider first, it's going to be a lot easier for him to learn and for him to develop that strength and learn how to use his body in that different way, without the extra weight of the rider and just kind of the extra difficulty of having a rider on his back. So when we can teach him on the ground first, then when we do go to put a rider on his back, he's already got the foundation. He already knows how to use his body. He already knows how to engage his body and lift his back and all of those things. And then when we do put that weight on him, just like in the video at the beginning, when Kelly was in a better posture, when I put weight on her back, she was able to support that weight without hollowing away from it. So we're just giving our horse a better foundation so that when we do start riding him, everything is going to be easier for him. Another benefit in handwork is that you as the human could see the way the horse is moving and using his body. So if you're sitting on his back, you don't really get to see his body moving. You know, you can see the front half of his in front of you, but that's really all you can see. So when you're doing in hand work, you can see when the horse is leaning, or when he's getting crooked, or when he's getting braced in his jaw, or getting too much weight on the forehand, or whatever it is. You can see those things as they come up, and you can see the changes in his body as his posture changes. And then also it's just a fun challenge for both the horse and the rider. So it's something different that you can do with your horse to kind of change things up and maybe give him a break from riding, maybe do something different from riding just to keep him more engaged and do something fun and different. All right, just check my notes and make sure that's all I wanted to say on that. I think so. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and open it up for questions. Let me look in the chat and see if we had any come up here. Okay, so someone asked if tension is typically due to apprehension and anxiety, and it definitely can be. I think we kind of talked about that a little bit. Sometimes tension happens just because the horse is physically not in very good shape or hasn't learned how to use their body very well. So tension happens that way. It can definitely be due to apprehension or anxiety. You know, tension happens as just part of life too, right? So I'm sure every single one of you has had a day where you wake up and some part of your body is a little stiff or sore or whatever, you know. So as we're going through life, things happen. We get a little tight, we get sore, maybe we get, you know, something makes us anxious, you know, whatever it is, things happen and tension is going to pop up. So, you know, even with a horse that has been trained and knows how to use their body correctly, I still will go through and check their body for any tension and do whatever I need to do. If I do find tension, I might do some in-hand exercises to release that tension or to help them out with those areas before I start doing any more serious work. So, you know, tension, there's a lot of reasons that tension can come up. And it's something that's never going to completely go away. Again, just because of life and, you know, things happen as part of life. So these in-hand exercises are great to do with your horse throughout the entirety of their career. Oh, okay. Looks like someone knows where that image came from. So that's awesome. Susan E. Harris, centered riding. Okay, so check her out. The centered riding stuff is very good. Okay, someone asked, I train using positive reinforcement. Will I be able to use these exercises with positive reinforcement? Definitely. Yes, you can use whatever form of positive reinforcement you want to use. So that can be scratches, that can be giving treats if you want to give treats. You don't have to use treats. You can use praise, vocal praise. You can use that energy of gratitude that I talked about. So those are all different ways you can incorporate positive reinforcement into your work. And I do definitely use those. One thing that's really cool about this work is that it becomes kind of intrinsically motivating for the horse. So what that means is that the work is kind of its own reward, because the work, when we do these exercises, it makes the horse feel better. So his body feels better. He finds relaxation, so he might emotionally feel better. So as we're doing the exercises, the horse feels better. So that's kind of its own reward too, that just kind of happens as part of the work. And once the horse figures out that this work makes him feel better, they actually will start looking forward to it, and they'll even start going into that healthier posture on their own and more easily, and they might offer it themselves because they know that it feels good. So the work kind of becomes its own reward. So that's really cool. But yes, you can definitely use positive reinforcement as well. Carla has a stick shift. Have I worked with horses that have kissing spines? Yes. And the exercises that we are going to be doing can definitely be beneficial to horses that have kissing spines. Excuse me. Depending on the severity of the kissing spine, definitely work with your veterinarian as well. And, always talk to your veterinarian about what you might want to be doing with your horse physically, as far as exercises and that kind of thing. But yes, definitely the in-hand work and teaching the horse how to engage and use their body in a better way can help with kissing spines. If you think back to, actually, let me see if I can pull it up again. Okay, so I think hopefully you guys can see the image with the spines again. So if you look at the one on the bottom, the hollow back, that horse really actually probably has kissing spines with how close those spinous processes are together. So that's kind of what a kissing spine type back is going to look like. So by encouraging the horse to lift his back up more, we can create a little bit more space in between those spinous processes and take some pressure off of the horse's back that way, and hopefully help him to feel a little bit more comfortable in his back. And depending on the severity of the kissing spine, how long it's been going on, and that kind of thing, there may be only so much that you can do. But any amount of relief that you can give the horse is going to only help him to feel more comfortable. So as long as you've got the approval of your veterinarian, I think this work is definitely going to be beneficial for a kissing spine horse. I do have a client who I've been working with for a couple of years now, whose horse, when she got her, was diagnosed with mild kissing spine. So her case was mild, but she was having kind of the start of kissing spine. And we did the in-hand work, and then later on progressed to classical dressage work under saddle. And then when she had the horse re-examined, probably about 2 years later, she had the x-rays, she had the horse re-x-rayed by a different vet, and the kissing spine was completely gone. The vet actually said that if she hadn't known that the horse had kissing spine at one point in time, she never would have guessed that the horse did, based on the new x-rays. So this work can definitely make a difference in your horse's back. Again, that was a mild case, and I'm not saying that that kind of change can happen with a more severe case, but any kind of relief and comfort that we can give our horses is definitely beneficial for them. So yeah, this can be really good for kissing spines. Okay. Jody says, I am a first-time horse owner and focus more on relationship building rather than accomplishments. I'm excited to learn actual techniques to help my horse carry herself more efficiently. Yeah, that's awesome, Jody. I think you will definitely find that these exercises will be enjoyable for you in building your partnership and your relationship with your horse. And yeah, helping your horse to carry herself better. And there's nothing wrong with not wanting big accomplishments. I think just wanting a better partnership with your horse is a wonderful goal. And you know, we all want what's best for our horses, so we can help them to feel a little bit more comfortable in their bodies. That's going to definitely improve our relationship and our partnership with our horses. So glad to have you here, Jody. Cool. All right, so it looks like that is all of the questions that came up in the chat. So if anyone else has any questions, you're welcome to unmute and ask away. And I don't know who's on here. I think got a couple of my students on here. I don't know, Michelle or Jen, would you guys be interested in sharing your experiences at all with the in-hand work?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing.
Awesome.
So my light is so bright. Yeah, Danny is a different horse. I had never done in-hand work before. I came to Bethany and he was highly anxious. And we started doing the in-hand work, but not only was he anxious, his body was so tight. So his trot was very vertical, hard to sit, hard to post. And after doing the in-hand work, we just noticed a huge difference just in his top line, but that little, and I don't even know what you call that divot in his neck, what you would even name that, has smoothed out. His carriage is so much different, and his anxiety level is so much calmer. And I do like how him and I got to have a good bond, because it was hard at first to not ride, deciding, you know, to not ride and just do in-hand work for a while, just to see if we couldn't get his body feeling better. It was a hard decision to make, but it wasn't, you know, after a few lessons, it was like, I just knew it was the right thing to do for him and for me. And it's paying off, because I rode him today and he is a different horse, physically, mentally.
Awesome. Yeah, Michelle's horse has been making quite a cool transformation. So it's been really fun to watch you guys and see your progress. One thing I will say is Michelle did make the decision to stop riding Danny entirely. And I think that's a great thing to do, but it may not be necessary for every horse. So I'm not going to tell you that you have to stop riding your horse as you're going through this course. You don't, and you can definitely do this in addition to your ridden work. And I think you'll notice a change and a difference in your ridden work. For some horses, though, you may make the decision to stop riding them for a few weeks and just focus on in-hand work. Oftentimes, if I have a new horse that comes into training with me, we do spend the first couple of weeks just doing in-hand work, because it does help both with the horse physically, but then also developing my partnership and my connection with the horse and that kind of thing as well. So if you're if you're encountering a lot of struggles during your ridden work, it may be worth it to take some time to really focus on the in-hand work and just do that for a little while. And then when you do go back to the ridden work, I think you'll notice a big difference. I know Michelle definitely noticed a difference in her horse. It was really cool. And I love sharing this story because it's just, I love seeing the transformations. But the first time she rode her horse after he was off for a few months, of just doing the in-hand work. The first time she rode him, she was able to ride him on a long rein, completely loose rein, with him in a relaxed, stretched, long posture, using his body correctly, emotionally relaxed, versus being anxious before. She was able to steer him just off of her seat because he was emotionally in a good place and then physically in a good place. So he was able to respond to very subtle cues from just her seat, versus before she had to get a little bit more physical with her reins and her leg and that kind of thing. And they were just able to float around in a lovely little trot, and it was beautiful. And that was her first ride on him after, a few months of not riding at all and just doing in-hand work. So yeah, really cool stuff. All right. Let's see. I think. Oh, Jen's here too. Yay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jen.
I was just gonna say I really enjoy the in-hand work too. I had seen Bethany doing it with my horse, but then to be able to actually do it myself, it kind of changed things a little more, and I felt our connection grew a lot. Also, like I feel like it improved her balance a lot too, because she's kind of, her one side, her right hip is a little bit higher than the other side, and just seeing different things with her, it did really improve a lot for us. When I first came to Bethany, she was super anxious. Now she's like, she just comes right at the gate and she does what she has to do. There's not a whole lot of, I don't want to say fight with her or anything, but we work together now. We're a team, versus before I always felt like, how am I ever going to get to a point where we can just like do things together, where now we do all the time. So
Yeah.
much better.
Awesome. Yeah, Jen has also made a lot of really cool progress with her horse. They've come a long way together. So they've done some super awesome stuff too. Jen's horse has some physical limitations as well because of previous injuries. And the in-hand work has really helped her horse to feel more comfortable in her body and that kind of thing. So this is also a great way to help any horses that, maybe have some previous injuries and maybe have some compensations and that kind of thing, and help them to feel better and be more comfortable in their bodies. So yeah, and then the emotional component as well, and the behavior and the partnership and all that could definitely be developed through the in-hand work. So yeah, awesome. All right, I think we have a couple more questions that came in on the chat. Okay. Catherine asked if we could show the picture of the horse's neck showing the dip before the withers. Let me see if I can pull that one up again for you guys. Okay, so that's the first picture. So hopefully that comes up for you. So you can see the dip in front of the withers there. That's just because those thoracic sling muscles are not working. They're not engaged. So everything's dropping down into a sternum. You can see kind of the bulge on the base of the neck there, because again, everything's dropping down and versus being lifted up. And then here's the before and after. So you can see the change in the dip as the horse is getting stronger and is learning how to use his thoracic sling and is developing the muscles of his thoracic sling. And that dip is starting to go away. And I'm pretty confident that within a few more months, it's probably going to be gone entirely. So yeah, looking forward to that. And I think I mentioned that when this horse is actually working and is asked to come into a more engaged posture, that dip is not visible because those thoracic sling muscles come up even more when he's working. So yeah, pretty cool to see how dramatic of a change just in hand work can make on your horse's posture and their musculature. Because this was a result of just in hand work.
This is Catherine. Yeah, out of the 30,000 pictures I have of my horse, do I have one from the side to see if that? Because that's the only one that's close.
It's kind of hard to tell from
I
that
know.
angle. Yeah. It's the dip, it'll be right in front of the withers.
Yes.
Yeah, and not all of them develop that dip. Even if they aren't using their thoracic sling, they might not have the dip. If they do have a dip, there are a lot of different things that can cause it, but regardless of the cause, we want to think about engaging those thoracic sling muscles.
Well, that one's a little bit better.
Yeah. I'm having a hard time seeing the image from your phone there.
Yeah, I know.
That's okay.
Okay, now I know what picture to take for the before picture.
Yeah, go out and take a side shot. And another fun thing that you guys can maybe think about doing is go out and take some different conformation type photos of your horse now, and then take photos again after you go through the exercises in this class, and see if you notice a difference in your horse's musculature and their posture. All right. And then Claire said, my horse is 17 and hasn't been ridden regularly for a couple of years. I think in hand will be important to start with. Yes, definitely. In a case like that, I would definitely do a decent amount of in hand work before moving on to the ridden work. A horse that hasn't been ridden regularly, regardless of age, but especially for an older horse, you're going to want to develop the muscles that he's going to need on the ground first. And that way you're giving him the foundation that he needs before you get on him. So yeah, it would definitely be beneficial to do just in hand work for maybe even 2 or 3 months if you can before you start riding him, just to really give him a good foundation and get him strong enough before you start riding. And the in-hand work is what I do with all of my young horses too, or green older horses, because I've restarted a lot of older horses from the beginning who have been off for a while or that kind of thing. So I always do the in-hand work with them first before I start ridden work. And it just makes the transition to riding so much easier because physically they're ready for it. Emotionally, they're ready for it. And then they also have an understanding of how to communicate with the bit and bridle and, different aids for forward and stopping and backward and everything. They just are going to have a better understanding of the communication with you when you do in-hand work first. All right. Carla said a lot of OTTBs seem to have that dip. Yeah, I would probably agree with you. Some of it is maybe conformational, that makes them more inclined to it. And then some of it may just be the way that they're ridden. If they're ridden more on the forehand, not using their bodies correctly, that's going to cause the dip. But it can happen in a variety of different breeds. So it's not necessarily breed dependent, but conformation can have an impact on that, making some horses more prone to developing the dip. Bonnie asked, how important is it to get a lunging cavison? So hopefully you guys all saw that there was a video that I made on the equipment. If you guys didn't have a chance to watch that, it is posted in the Facebook group in the guides section. So you can take a look at that. And I do talk about how I use a cavison when I'm doing my in-hand work. I really like using a cavison, and because I do so much in-hand work, I have made the investment in, well, I actually have a couple of cavesons now. But you do not have to have a cavison to do any of the exercises that we're going to do in this class. You can do them all just with a regular halter. So you don't have to have a cavison. I do find that the cavison makes things a little bit easier. It makes my communication with my horse a little bit more clear. And I prefer to use a cavison, but you don't have to have one. So it's something where if you want to try it with the halter first and see how effective you're able to be and see how comfortable you are just using the halter, you can go right ahead and do that. If you're planning on doing a lot of in-hand work and you really want to continue with the in-hand work, maybe even beyond this class and just do a lot of it, then you might think about getting a cavison. And I do give you some recommendations for the cavesons that I've used in that video. And I talk a lot more about cavesons in that video. So you can check that out. That is in the Facebook group in the guides section. It should be in the week 1 guide for the introduction. Deb asks, how often per week would a good outcome of in-hand work? So that really depends on your goals, your horse's needs, and kind of what you want to do with your horse. If you have, a horse who's riding well and you just want to add something into it, like with my horses who I've been working for a while and they've got a pretty good foundation already, I might do in-hand work once a week or something like that. If I have a horse who I'm just starting or I'm restarting and they really need to develop their condition, then, I might do it several times a week. The exercises that we're going to be doing, especially the exercises in the first couple of weeks that are really about releasing tension and that kind of thing. You could really do those every day if you wanted to, and it wouldn't be harmful to the horse because it's really all about just helping them to release tension and find relaxation. So you could theoretically do it every day, but that's not to say you have to do it every day. If you're looking to build your horse's condition, you're going to want to do it at least 3 to 4 times a week if you're really talking about building strength and that kind of thing. If that's the only work that your horse is getting and you're really wanting to build strength, I would look at trying to do 3 to 4 times a week if you can. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a super long session. It can be anywhere from just 10 minutes to do a couple of releases and release some tension. And then that's it. Or it can be, up to half an hour or even an hour, depending on what you're working on. And again, if you're thinking about more just finding relaxation and releasing tension, it might be a little shorter session. If you're really working on building strength and condition, then it might be a longer session. And yeah. Carla said, I bought a lunging cavison for this class. It weighs a ton. I don't know what kind you got. They can be a little heavier, but it shouldn't be too terribly heavy. I'm not sure what kind of cavison you got. Depending on what type of nose piece it has, it may weigh a little bit more there. is there a more economical cavesson that you could recommend? There is. I will have to find a link for you. So let me find that, and I will post that in the Facebook group. But there are definitely some starter cavessons that you could look into. Jody said she ordered a cavesson from Dover that was really heavy and looked like a torture device, so she returned it. There are some that have really big nose pieces. I tend to stay away from those ones. So again, if you watch the video, you see the cavesson that I use has a fairly small, lightweight nose piece. It is a little bit heavier than like a bridal nose band. Because it does have some form and shape to it, but they shouldn't be, there are some that have like really chunky nose bands, and I tend to stay away from those. Jody said she found one from a Swedish company. So yeah, I mean, there are definitely lots of options out there. Cool. All right, so that's all I'm seeing in the chat. So again, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to unmute and you can ask your questions now. Cool. All right, well then, if there are no other questions, we will get on to what we're going to do this week. So after we finish up here, I'm going to be posting a video, and this is going to be kind of like pre-in-hand work for what we're going to do today. I'm going to post a video with an exercise for you to do. And this exercise is actually taken out of my Liberty training course. And it's an exercise that is going to just kind of open up the lines of communication between you and your horse. And it's going to teach your horse how to match what you're doing with your body. Okay. And it's also going to introduce you as a human to the ideas of using your body language and your energy and your intention to communicate with your horse a little bit more than just physical pressure. So as we're going through these exercises in the in-hand class, we are going to be using physical pressure to a certain extent in a way that we're going to guide our horse into different positions, but we don't want to be pulling and pushing and forcing them into positions because, again, that's just going to cause more bracing. So if we can start to communicate with our horses using our energy and our body language, that's going to help us so that our horse can understand what we're asking for, but we don't have to do as much physically to communicate with them. So I'm going to post a video in the Facebook group for you guys to watch. Again, this video is actually taken out of my Liberty training course, but it's a really good exercise for you to do, even if you never have any plans to do any kind of Liberty training. It's a really good exercise just to, again, kind of improve the communication between you and your horse. So that'll be your homework for this week. And then you can also just kind of ponder everything that we talked about in this video. And then we will be meeting again next Saturday, same time, 7:30 p.m. Central US time. And we will talk about any questions that you had in doing the exercise that I post. Did I say Saturday? I meant Monday.
Yes.
My last class that I did was on Saturdays. Sorry. Monday at 7:30 p.m. Central US time. We'll talk about any questions you have from either tonight's video or the exercise. You can share your experiences. And then after that, I will be posting the first of our actual in-hand exercises. So then basically each week, each Monday, we will have a live Q&A on Zoom here. So I'll post the Zoom link in the Facebook group. So we'll meet live on Zoom for you to ask any questions from the stuff that we did the week before. If you can't make it live and you have questions, you can post those in the Facebook group and I will answer them during the Q&A. So we'll have that, and then each week I will be posting a pre-recorded video for you to watch, which will have the exercise or exercises for that week for you to try with your horse. Okay. And then you guys can always at any time post questions in the Facebook group. And also, as we're going through all the different exercises in the course here, at any time, if you want to record a video of you working with your horse and post that into the group, and then I will give you my feedback on what you're doing with your horse. Because it's really easy to watch a video and think, oh yeah, I can do that with my horse. And then you try it and it's like, wait a minute, what is going on here? So it can be really helpful to get feedback on what's going on with your individual horse, because of course they're all different and they're all going to respond a little bit differently. So yeah, you're always welcome to post videos in the group for feedback. So I think that is all that I have for tonight, unless anyone